That's one small step for man.
Out for the. Hello everyone, welcome back to Here's What's Going On podcast with me, AJ. We'll jump right into the ABC's AJ's Book Corner, and we're coming from the book Queen of the Unwanted, which is the second book out of the After Women's War. I read that one already, so I'm on the second book in the series, and it starts with, from the moment he'd seen the results of his aptitude test at the age of 13. Jalzarian Ra Grifflam had set his sights on one day being named the Lord High Priest of Kafar, and he had never for a moment doubted his destiny. He had been appointed to the office and joined the royal council at the respectable age of 45, and the king had favored him with several land grants and titles that he had not even thought to hope for. No life was without its setbacks and disappointments, but Jalzarin knew he'd suffered far fewer than most. He could almost hear his late father railing at him, urging him to be satisfied with what he had. Lord Griffalam had even gone as far as to accuse his son of impiety for his outsized ambition. But though he suspected there had been at least a kernel of truth in his father's accusation, Jalzarin was admittedly not the most pious man to have held the office of Lord High Priest. He was not especially inclined to curb that ambition, which was what brought him here to the anteroom of the king's private study, when a more prudent man, some might even say a wiser man, would keep a safe distance from a monarch who had a distressing habit of replacing members of his royal council with little to no provocation. He paced anxiously, awaiting permission to enter, as his father's voice continued to whisper disencouragement into his ear. Even that the king was so apt to dismiss members of his royal council, Jalzarin could never rest secure, unlike the Lord High Priest who came before him. If he sat back and enjoyed the privileges of being on the council, he might all too easily find that seat pulled out from under him. There were plenty of other ambitious priests eager for his position. The study door opened and the king's personal secretary stepped out. "His Majesty will see you now," he said with a sweeping gesture. Jalzarin took what he hoped was a quiet, steadying breath, pushing any doubts deep inside where the king could not glimpse them. Then he stepped into the study and bowed low, surreptitiously, studying the king's countenance for some hint of his current disposition. Jalzarin wouldn't be so crash as to describe King Calvin as moody, but one could never tell which days he would be receptive to the opinions of his advisors. And as Jalzarin had come with the specific intent of overstepping the bounds of his authority, he risked souring his relationship with his liege if he did not tread with extreme care. Yeah. So this is a follow-up, and they're jumping right in with a totally different character than was introduced in the first book. The first book really focused on all of the female characters and like some of the male characters, but this one's focusing on the male character first here, and it's the first chapter talking about the abyss, and we'll see where it goes. I'm excited. I like reading like series books. I always like to see the evolution of the characters in the story. But yeah, let's jump right into today's episode, where I'm actually going to be talking about why the brain keeps talking to itself. And it's an article by Michelle K. Lewis, PhD, where they discuss the research and discovery of the default mode networks and how within that system it's basically like where the brain receives and sends and receives information. And the article discusses the ability of the brain to shift between its perpetual mode and memory mode. Basically, the perpetual mode is based off of what we see, and the memory mode is kind of based off of what we imagine. The default mode network, which they'll also call and reference as DMN, assists with how we as human beings are able to be in the present, remember the past, and then look and plan for the future. But what if the default mode network is overstimulated? The article further discusses the overexposure that social media has on the default mode network. Evidently, the DMN is still basically is ill affected by the continuous activation of doom scrolling, not allowing the part of the brain that receives to rest, and then tiring the sender as well from basically bombarding it with the constant comparison of our current lives to the lives of others and situations of others on social media. Basically, social media doesn't let your mind rest. The article concludes with discussing meditation as an active treatment for DMN fatigue, and provide steps such as limiting the amount of time interacting with social media we have, and things we can replace that time with, whether it's meditation, having in-person social interactions, and also acknowledging when you're ill-affected by DMN and fatigue. But of course, I'll include this article in the show notes. We'll move on to what I'm happy and grateful for. I am happy and grateful for having friends. And good friends. I recently called up a long-term friend for a favor. I don't ask for much from my friends. I'm a rather low-maintenance friend to have, but when I asked my friend to help me with something, they agreed and helped. Being able to have good friends and be a good friend, I feel, is something that I'm happy and grateful for, because the more people I meet, the more I realize, people my age, that there's people that don't really have good friends or are not good friends themselves. But thankfully, I'm lucky to have some good ones. The quote: "Instead of asking, how can I avoid upsetting them, try asking, how can I stay honest and grounded, even if this is uncomfortable." I'm learning how to be honest and still keep it 100. I'm learning to ask for help and be understood when asking for help. It's hard to do, but I'm learning and I'm trying. And I think that instead of saying I'm pissed off, saying I am a little bit upset as to how the approach and how the information was delivered. There's ways to say things that are not your initial reaction, which is to go off. For me, that's how I look at it. But before I go, be sure to check out the show notes. Also, check out my books on Amazon titled Poems to Cry to in the Dark and Love Letters Never Sent to Myself. Leave a 5-star rating. I'm glad you're still here, and hope you have the day you deserve. Bye!
One giant leap